So you have it in 11120 and you have it in 54950. They said it twice. One of the few places in the codes where they said it twice and it's word for word the same. It's a very important concept. This is a republic. And because it's a republic, that has validity. So we don't yield our sovereignty. Well, what is a sovereign? I think we can get that now. Sovereignty, the power to do everything in a state without accountability. That's what a sovereign is. In other words, you make the law. There's no law above you. Moral law certainly is not law, not in the secular sense. Okay? Understand that there is a limit. It doesn't mean that we're without law. Okay? All some sovereign has to do is point his finger at you and say, you violated this rule I just made up. Okay? And then your only protection will be a jury. But, so, it is possible, to do wrong and get punished for it. So but it's a different system. Common law, you know what the punishment is for first-time burglary under common law? We know it's 30 days under statutory, don't we? Death. You get executed. It's a capital offense. Okay? Have you ever been burglarized? You ask anybody who's been burglarized, do you feel violated? Do you want to kill somebody? You bet. Well, under the common law, that's how it worked. So, anyway, sovereignty, it's the power to do everything in a state without accountability. So, in the United States, the accountability does not exist unless the other sovereigns get mad at you. Okay? Who are the other sovereigns? Well, they're the members of the jury. A jury of peers. Do you know what peers are? Huh? No, it's not your equals. Not at all. Never meant that. A jury of peers means a jury composed of members of the peerage. The peerage is the sovereignty. Okay? Back before we had the 14th Amendment, everybody except the slaves was a sovereign. So when you had a jury, you had a jury of your fellow peers. Sure, they were your equals, but they were equal because they were sovereign too.
Family related?
No, it doesn't have to be family related. They're sovereigns. They're noble. They're the members of the nobility, the peerage. So since they were members of the peerage, and you were too automatically, in the United States, since everybody was a sovereign, everybody got judged by their equals, right? Now, here's what happened one time. Kind of cute. Now they try to compose jurors of citizens of the United States, which is interesting because there was a case in San Diego I'd say about a dozen years ago or so, I forget. I heard about it. I should have gone and verified it. But anyway, this guy was accused of something and he demanded a jury of his peers. And nobody who got into the jury would admit that he was not a citizen of the United States. Nobody would admit that he was above the government. They were all law-abiding citizens, right? So finally, the accused insisted on a jury of his peers and made it clear to the judge he knew what a peer was. So the judge finally ordered the sheriff of San Diego County to go out and find some peers. And he had to report back he couldn't find any, and he had to dismiss the case against him. So, okay, kind of fun here. Now, you see, when we broke away from England, we had an attitude. Okay? The attitude was, we're sovereign. They understood it back then quite well. It's because of our educational system from the 1850s to the 1950s, from the time they instituted that first public school till the end in 1950, when they stripped out, or they actually phased out, everything relating to civics, the study of personal rights. And so they've changed a lot of attitudes. I noticed about roughly 30 years ago that they've been implementing the visual signs of lack of sovereignty on the part of the citizens. How do I know? Well, let me tell you this. You go to England, or you watch on TV any proceeding that involves the sovereignty, the Queen of England, or if you look at a no parking sign on the street, you'll see that there's a stripe that goes across, and the stripe goes visually from your upper left to your lower right as you see it. That stripe signifies a command of the sovereignty. It's what you do. Most people are right-handed. So, when you go into battle, you reach across your body and you grab your sword. That's the sign of power. And you draw out your sword with your right hand, if you're right-handed, which most people were. And so, in heraldry, it reflects that. Well, guess what? Our ties that men wore reflect that. That's the tie of a sovereign. Okay? All the ties in the United States, or 99% of them, were that way. It's a symbol of sovereignty. About 20 years ago, I noticed that they were phasing out this type of tie and phasing in neutral ties. Till finally, about 10 years ago, you couldn't find anything but neutral ties, pretty much. Well, there's a few, okay, but of the sovereign ties, but most of them were neutral. Now I've noticed in the next 10 years, they phased in stripes going the other way. That's what they wear in England when they're subjects of the Queen. You go to Bullock's or these places and try to find a tie with stripes like they go on my tie. You can't find them, or you're lucky if you do. If you want to find one of these ties, go to a thrift store. Okay? It's significant. When I go to court, I always wear a striped tie. Why? Because if I wear a tie going the other way, I might have some bad luck and run into a judge who knows that little fact. And he might make you see, we communicate with words, we communicate with signs and symbols too. And so, most judges are ignorant of this. They have no idea about heraldry. So it doesn't make a hill of beans of difference what tie I wear. But I'll tell you something, if the other guy sees me, you see, wearing a tie like this, okay, I'm wearing a tie. Wearing the other tie, if the other guy knows, he knows I'm ignorant. So I can't tell him what my knowledge is, but I certainly can portray my ignorance if I'm not careful. So when you go to court, I recommend that everybody pay attention to some of these other traditions that are hundreds of years old, because some people in those courts are educated and do know. It's just a subtle thing, doesn't make or break the case, but it might make or break an attitude. Okay, so now, you can be a sovereign for some purposes and not a sovereign for others. Where do I get that from? Well, it turns out there are some cases, a few, but my favorite case is this one right here. Reservation of sovereignty. Oh, here's that other case. Sovereignty means that the decree of sovereign makes law. So the government code informs the judge who's working for the government that I don't yield my sovereignty to him. And then I have this case here of the Moscow Fire Insurance Company of Moscow, Russia versus the Bank of New York. Okay? And that they said that's what sovereignty means. The decree of the sovereign makes law. So I couple them together. You want to know what the law is, Judge? Just ask me. Okay? All right. So, likewise up above, the very meaning of sovereignty is that the decree of the sovereign makes law. More of the same. But here's an interesting case. Reservation of sovereignty. Just kind of, I'll tell you in business English what happened. The Indian tribe entered into a contract with a corporation to do some mining. The corporation brought in all the equipment, set it up after they made their contract, and they were going to split the profits, okay? So they're bringing in, they're extracting the minerals and hauling them off the Indian reservation to do whatever they do with mine stuff. Okay, everything's going fine, okay? One day, the tribal council said, you know, we should establish an extraction tax. An extraction tax. You know, yeah, depletion tax, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, they decided to tax everything that got mined out of there. Well, the corporation screamed to high heaven on that one. They said, hey, you know, we have a contract. You agreed to your share of the profits, and all you're doing is cutting yourself a bigger share. Well, it ended up in the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, too bad. They're sovereign. They have a right to tax. Okay? And you're going to like this statement, which they said, which I have here. Okay. It is one thing to find that the tribe has agreed to sell the right to use the land and take valuable minerals from it, and quite another to find that the tribe has abandoned its sovereign powers simply because it has not expressly reserved them through a contract. Do you now understand why it is you can have a Social Security number and still retain your sovereignty? Okay? That's the linchpin case for us. Okay? Because look, that statutory law, I know some guys who are really, really sharp on it. And I have a problem with that. The problem is that I'm lazy. I can't deal with it. I don't want to spend, I've already spent my thousands of hours in the law library. And I just can't deal with this. You know, I can't know everything. I don't want to know everything. So, here's the loophole. This is what gets me out of it. Hey, I can be a sovereign for some purposes, a citizen for other purposes, and the choice is mine. And just because I signed a contract doesn't mean that I gave everything up. Okay? Just because I failed to reserve my sovereignty doesn't mean that it's lost. So that's kind of a nice one. I guess we can skip over that. There's more detail, but let's go on to something else. Okay, Bill of Rights. Anybody ever heard of the Second Amendment? Yeah, I think a few of you have. Well, guess what? Amendments not available to U.S. citizens. Right to keep and bear arms. Think about it. Think about it. What does the Second Amendment say? It talks about people, doesn't it? It doesn't talk about citizens. Citizens are subject to the jurisdiction. The government is subject to the people's jurisdiction. So, you have a right. Well, let's put it this way. Your rights are anything you say they are if you are a people. But if you're a citizen of the United States, then you have no rights. All you have is privileges granted by the government. But, let me warn you, or actually alert you, if everybody were told that, hey, you've got privileges, you don't have any rights, do you think there would be a reaction among the citizens? Oh yeah, there would be. Yeah. There would be. No, that could be built up if they were all told that. So, they're not told that. Okay? You've never heard the government say that point blank. Well, I mean, you might have, but as a general rule, when you look at the propaganda that comes out, it's always, they never say that, okay? They never say, oh, you just have privileges and we'll pick and choose what privileges you should have, okay? No, what they do is these privileges have been repackaged with a different title. They're called civil rights. Okay? You see, when you're in your sovereign capacity, all rights that you choose are yours. But if you're a citizen of the United States, or a citizen of a state for that matter, you are subject. A citizen has an obligation he owes to the city, to the municipal law. And the United States statutes are municipal law. Okay, all statutes are municipal law. So you have duties you owe. And so you have